Okay, let's start the second presentation. Welcome our second speaker, Cristian. Cristian is a staff engineer in Zendesk, and he will bring us the topic about a really huge monolith. So we are capable to do that in Rails. Let's welcome Cristian. Good luck.
Thank you. Hello, my name is Cristian. This is a talk of the RubyConf Community Conference. No, you didn't enter the wrong cinema. I'm still going to talk about Ruby. There is a funny thing, like until I arrived literally to the theater, I didn't know this talk was going to happen in a cinema. But anyway, I wanted to start talking about Gladiator 2, and you will see why. So I decided that it would be nice to put the trailer. It's a short trailer, it's only 1 minute.
This is not a matter of which a duel should be fought to the death. It should be settled quietly. If this were to get out, war would follow Rome.
If you think this can be stopped, you are fooling yourselves. All of this madness began with Maximus Meridius. And now, years later, we are paying for his doing.
You rest your bones. I'll finish your quest for you.
I'm tired of reliving that nightmare every day. What do you want from me? Revenge.
This is the last step in a master plan. A plan long in the making.
Okay, and all of you are thinking, okay, how is this related with Ruby? Well, I can tell you why. I want you to understand that Ruby is very special. We are like a really special community. This is a presentation about the history of Rails through a monolith, the monolith of Zendesk that has been around for 17 years now. And again, how we tell stories, if you like cinema, I love cinema. There's been a lot of discussion about Gladiator 2 and if it's historically accurate. And it's not the first time we have this debate with Napoleon, the previous movie by Ridley Scott. A lot of people were saying that, they had to add drama to the story, they are making things more beautiful. It's like a thing that some directors do. Okay. Do you know which film didn't need any kind of added drama to be epic? I mean, you know that. Like, this community is full of dramas. It's actually fantastic. Like, I think last year was DHH against TypeScript community. There used to be a website called rubydramas.com. I think they removed it. It's fascinating. I mean, don't get me wrong. Actually, I love this. It's like a huge entertainment value. Like, for a year or so, I tried to become a Scala developer. That was terrible. And I went to a Scala conference. And for you, just to give you an idea what I saw there, the majority of speakers look like this, like nice suit, they look like responsible people. And in the meanwhile, I also went to a Ruby conference, and the keynote speaker looked like this. I mean, we're special. That's for sure. But now, let me introduce a little bit why I wanted to talk about this topic. For me, it's an interesting moment in my life that maybe that's why it made me thought about the last 10, 15 years. That's the time I've been a Rails developer. I moved back to Barcelona, my hometown, after 10 years. I also was my 10th anniversary working for Zendesk. And I also started watching this TV show called Frieren. Does anybody know about it? No. It's an anime show that is a typical environment, Lord of the Rings, elves, magic, swords. And it follows a very beautiful tradition in fantasy of talking about technology or of a lot of things philosophically through magic. For example, one of my favorite novels, A Wizard Over Sea, states that magic is if you know the true name of things, which in my mind, maybe like object-oriented programming too much, means like, oh, if I create the right abstraction, I totally control it. You know, it's a way of thinking. But I mean, this metaphor is not created by me. Arthur C. Clarke said in a different way. And well, what makes Frieren special and relevant to this? The thing in Frieren is that she lives in a world where there is very few elves. Elves are immortal, and the vast majority of other chatters are human. So she lives through a lot of things. You see the development of magic and a lot of other items, but one of them is magic through centuries. So things that didn't matter in the beginning, there's a discovery made, and they become very relevant. In the end, it's very similar to how we develop any kind of technology, and particularly software. And honestly, after watching the show, I started to identify with Frieren. In the show, she's an elf that is over 1,000 years old. That makes her the possessor of forgotten magical knowledge. I would say I am equally mythical. I've been in the same tech company writing Ruby for more than 10 years. And this makes me the possessor of forbidden magical Rails knowledge. I would like to share it. First, I would like to talk a bit about the idea of monolith. That's something that was very, very popular in the early 2010s. It was like the way to go. But in the early 2010s, we had a lot of bad ideas. But then after, I would say, late 2010s, it was a terrible idea to say even anything positive about monolithic architectures on Twitter. And I would say that lately, it's become more okay to defend them. For me, it's not surprising. I think that a lot of debates in tech, in particular in software engineering, behave like a pendulum. First is option A, and option A all the way, then B, and we move like a pendulum. I really dislike when people talk about software engineering as a very hard science. For me, we're more like architects or even softer than that, maybe. So this doesn't mean that because it's a pendulum you can do whatever. This is a dangerous pendulum. There are ideas that are wrong or make less sense. For example, once upon a time, I remember that a lot of people say that relational databases were finished. Everybody should move to NoSQL, and that I use NoSQL databases in some circumstances, but I think that relational databases are still very important. And if you thought that this was a spicy take, I have even a crazier one. I honestly think that the microservice boom in the last 10 years is a bit a zero interest phenomena, meaning that so much money was put into tech that some things that shouldn't have worked that well worked. I feel a little funny about this slide because after like a few weeks after I put this in a presentation, the DHH said something similar. But I think a lot of people thought the same. Microservices, to the extent that they were used, were being maintained by hiring a lot of people. I mean, a few years ago, I was visiting a friend in Montreal, and he told me about his startup. And basically, what I got is that they had more microservices than customers. I'm always afraid that he's going to see my presentation and he's going to tell me. But yeah, like he was telling me, wow, yeah, we have this architecture. I am the only person that understands it at the company. And I was saying, well, I mean, this sounds crazy, but you're doing great. They say, no, we're not doing great. And now that there is less money into tech, I think we are seeing out of the trade-offs that you do with microservices. Maintaining a service with thousands of microservices, if you have 8,000 engineers, is way easier than if you have only 2,000. The added complexity becomes much more apparent in this case. Don't get me wrong. I'm not extremely. I'm not even against microservice architecture. I think that is a tool that should be used in certain circumstances, the same as monoliths. I am not like the current CEO of Twitter, that's called microservices bloatware. That's pretty crazy to me. I am more. My opinion is more similar to Jason Warner, the GitHub CTO, who says that it's a spectrum. You most probably, when you start a new company, a new application, you should go for a monolith and then slowly break it down into smaller services. This is kind of what we did at Zendesk. But we follow like a very peculiar path. Originally, we wanted to have an ecosystem of Rails applications that would share logic. And the idea would be that you could bring a lot of logic, like authentication, for example, through the gem file. And actually, if you look in our monolith, this is how it looks. We have a lot of private gems that are shared by a few applications. Then we got to the it's not no. Yeah. Then we got to the what I call the service era. That's when we started building services. Actually, for us, this was not so much triggered by our necessities, but by the fact that we were acquiring new companies. Like, for example, we acquired, later I will talk about that, but we acquired a chat company. You don't want that the account information for chat company is in the other product. You want to have a centralized account service that shares data across the two applications. Finally, right now, we are in the era of an event-driven architecture, where we have multiple services that write events via Kafka, and other services consume them, which triggers other events, etc. Still, we have a pretty big Rails monolith, and we have a lot of modularization. We are experimenting with different ways to use them. Right now, we are using Packwork, but we're still deciding how we'll do this. So I didn't want to move on from this section before talking a bit about the front end. If you've been, like me, working in tech since the late 2000s, the late 2010s, again, as I said, in the 2010s, we took a lot of bad decisions. And you've probably seen what I call the great JavaScript wars. Like, if you remember in 2014, you went to Hacker News and there was a new framework, JavaScript. And now it still happens, but the crazy thing by then is that all of them were getting traction. Like every 6 months, someone wanted to rewrite the whole application in a new framework. And you can see that, like at Zendesk, we still use quite a lot. Backbone, React, Ember. I'm surprised that we don't use Angular, honestly. We have even something that for me is super funny, is what we call car.js. And nobody outside of Zendesk knows what is car.js, because that's not the official name. Basically, we had an engineer called Cart who wrote his own framework and left the company. So that's car.js. Of course, we don't have documentation. So we are kind of centralizing more and more on React. I think for multiple reasons. First of all, React is quite a nice framework, I would say. I love React Native, for example, but also I feel sometimes that the community just got tired of so much change. We need to centralize efforts in, okay, I learned one framework and this is going to be useful for a while. Next, I will comment on adopting new technologies, how we decide what we adopt at Zendesk. Of course, we were born as a Ruby company. But of course, you need more technologies in a lot of situations. So once upon a time, it was kind of easy to add new technologies to the stack. And that was a bad idea. So the thing is that you have a team. Right now, I think in product, we are 1,900, and everybody can add whatever they want. This chaos. So what we do more and more, well, what we do for a few years already, is we have something called the tech menu. You want to start writing applications on Elixir? Fantastic. You write you write a document, and it needs to be approved by the architectural team. We have a famous case on this. It was like, which language do we want to use to write services? In the end, like the two winners were Java and Scala. I was Team Elixir. We actually write a proposal to adopt Elixir at Zendesk. It was rejected because they told us that for those purposes we already have Java and Scala. And actually, this is very interesting because with the time, because we're a very big company, the company kind of divided. Different parts of the company were using Scala and others Java. The issue that we had is that it was very hard for us to hire Scala engineers or even to teach other engineers to use Scala. So now more and more people that work at Zendesk do services only in Java. Finally, the way that most technologies get adopted at Zendesk is not so much via intentions, but via acquisitions. Like through the time, we've acquired quite a lot of companies. Like of here, this is our main products. Around half of them came via acquisition. And I will just give an example. Our first acquisition was a company from Singapore, Zopim. Now it's called Zendesk Chat. And Zopim used Python. So, Python is a Zendesk language too for us. Next come a section that it's very loved by me. Like a couple of years ago, I made a presentation at RailsConf about it, about scaling an Rails application. And I have like a little bit of a personal story. Like before joining Zendesk, I founded a company called Playful Bet, which honestly never made any money, but it was pretty popular. Like we were, I think, one of the 50 most visited places, websites in Spain, something like this. And I was also the only engineer. So it was incredibly hard for me to scale. And at this point, I could have went like, hey, well, I'm a great engineer, Rails doesn't scale, that's it. I just realized that didn't make any sense for me to complain while companies like Zendesk or GitHub or Shopify are able to scale it. So actually, that's why I joined Zendesk. Like I wanted to learn how did they do it. For you to understand from where this idea of Rails doesn't scale comes from, have some ideas. You need to understand also the situation in which Rails appears as a popular framework. Which also kind of parallels with the existence of Zendesk. There's a picture from 2007, like the three founders. Well, you can only see two. The one in the front is our first CTO, Morten. And this kind of parallels with the apparition of Web 2.0. Like before, websites were static, and with Web 2.0, users start to interact with them. You need a database. There can be a lot of interaction in between. At the same time, it's the apparition of Twitter. Twitter was like the golden boy of social media for a long time, and it was the golden example of how Rails can work, which is funny now. That lasted until Twitter moved out of Rails, and this kind of became like the great example of why Rails doesn't make sense. I mean, it's true that for a long time, Twitter had a lot of problems with scaling. Do you know what is this or? Yeah, the fail whale in famous, like I wrote like my master thesis was built around Twitter, and I got this when I was doing the demo. I remember it very well. My point is that don't worry, you are in good company. There are other companies that have scaled Rails to a significant extent. Maybe not at Twitter scale, but to the level of GitHub, Shopify, Zendesk. And actually, I think that the work that Shopify is doing in this level is incredible. There's a tweet from Toby Lutke, the CEO of Shopify, saying that during Black Friday, I think, they were getting 60 million requests per minute. That's quite a lot. Of course, what you're thinking, like knowing that the impact that Twitter had to the name of Rails, to the brand of Rails, you were thinking, what is Twitter leadership thinking right now about Rails? Well, we know. Wow. Okay, I don't have enough time. I literally made a full presentation about that, but now it's shameless self-promotion. I wrote a book about this topic, so if you have time and the money, you can check it. Said this one, the most important part about scaling an application is database. This is going to be typically the bottleneck for the vast majority of applications. Multiple techniques to do that, apart from caching and all that. One is sharding. Surprisingly, a lot of people is not familiar with it, but the idea is that if your database is easily breakable into fragments, for example, if most B2B, you only want to offer the data to the customer. You don't want two accounts to share data between themselves. That's probably you'll have a huge problem if you do that. So then what you can do is just break the database into multiple databases, and it becomes way more manageable. If you have like a database with 1 billion records and you break it into 1,000 databases, you only have, by average, you should have tables of 1 million records that are way easier to manage. The other one that we do use quite a lot is what we call archiving. This means that all data is sent to DynamoDB. What is all data or what you can archive? It's a completely a product decision. We have changed this in multiple ways. Also, the features that you can do, what you can do with that archive data can change. A lot of times we decide that it's read-only. Sometimes we accept writes. but it's a good technique to make it scale. Of course, you may be thinking, well, here you're kind of cheating, no? You are changing how typical access is done. Well, one point I would like to say is that there are 3 properties in good databases. One is that they have a consistent runtime. The other is that they are able to manage complex queries. And the third is that they hold a large data set. In the end, you can only have 2 out of 3. In the beginning, when you are in the startup stage, you have, the query runtime is very stable, and you are able to manage complex queries until the dataset becomes too big. At this point, yes, you run complex queries into a large dataset, but other times they don't work or they are too slow. It's a problem. Eventually, what we are going more and more to is trying to reduce the amount of complex queries. Actually, in my opinion, one of the reasons why microservices tend to scale better is because they push for simpler queries. When you have data divided into multiple databases that go with each service, you can making a complex query with multiple joins across multiple tables just becomes too hard. Next, I would like to talk about testing and reliability in a big company. Again, we are a lot of people at Zendesk. And it's a great day to talk about testing because I don't know if you know what's happening. Like basically an antivirus push an update that break the kernel of Windows. Like there's a huge mess in airports all around the world. So please test. And one thing I wanted to discuss here is a traditional debate in the Ruby community, test versus types, or in the programming community. The idea, you probably have heard that, Ruby applications are hard to maintain because they don't have types. The original proposal of Ruby was that you don't need types because you have tests. You need to write a lot of tests, and that will save you. And if you don't have tests, you should have them anyway. I mean, there is a back and forth. I think both sides have a good point. But in our case, we are completely on the test side. We have a lot of tests. For you to give you an idea, we have like the monolith itself, not counting all these private gems that I talked before. We have over 1.6 million lines of code. And can anybody try to guess how many unit tests we have? No, more than, not 5 million, no. Starts with a 5. So we have 55,786 tests. And you will say, how the hell do you manage all this? Well, we are lucky. We have our own private Cerberus. His name is Ryan Davis. He protects the main branch very strongly. Like this is literally his avatar in Slack. Like the other day, 2 junior engineers were coming to me and saying, Cristian, I'm sorry, we were not able to merge the feature. There is a guy that is telling us to add more tests. And I was like, oh, you met Ryan. So some of you probably know Ryan because he's the author of Minitest and the main maintainer. And the question you are doing right now is the same question that a lot of junior engineers do to me. Why do you use Minitest? Because there is other maybe more popular testing frameworks in Ruby, but we have a good reason. As I was saying, we have a lot of tests, and even worse, we ran the whole test suite twice for each PR. I will explain later why. This means that with each PR, we ran 111,572 tests, which is a lot of tests. We like Minitest because it's smaller than other options, less magic, and way faster. In fact, when we have tried to play a little bit with Minitest to make more Zendesk, what we try is to remove features. Still, despite a lot of work on it, we still have pain points on our testing. One of them, maybe the hardest one, is flaky test. If you have a test that is flaky, a lot of times performance tests tend to be flaky, for example. This can break any of those stages. And I think right now we run test group in groups of 2,000. So this means that if one test breaks, you need to run 2,000 tests. So this is way better than before. If you don't remember, until a few years ago, you couldn't run each action. You need to run the whole suite. So we need to run over 100,000 tests if one broke. Still, I would say the most important part of all this is ownership. Why? Again, a lot of code, and a lot of code means a lot of developers. Historically, in our monolith, there has been 2,459 committers. Of course, you may be thinking, well, Zendesk has been around for 17 years. Maybe a lot of things were from the past. Well, yes, but no. Only in the last year, we had 570 different engineers pushing code into the monolith. So it's a lot of people. And if you don't take care, put limits, put rules, this can end up into some kind of battle royale very easily. So what do? We use a GitHub feature called owners. So all files that are in the monolith needs to be owned by one team at least. How does this help? So every time that you want to change, for example, the last one, app models, tickets, conversation, someone from these teams and the score needs to approve. Moreover, if there is an incident, it's way easier to detect, to know who to ping if you can know the ownership of each file. Yeah. Next, I would like to talk about upgrading Rails. That's actually something interesting because Zendesk has been using Rails for a long time. We started with Rails 1. Actually, there is a story there that our original CEO, Mikkel, used to work with DHH before. We both are Danish, so they used to work together before he created Rails. How we upgrade? Well, using tests. Tests are very useful to know what is going to break if we upgrade Rails. Actually, that's why we run it twice. Not all the time, but for a lot of part of the year, we are running it twice. One is for the current version, and the next is for the next version. Like this, what we avoid is regressions. The idea is that if a test suite is broken, that's fine, but once it gets green, it cannot go back to red. It's a way to protect the work of people operating Rails. Still, we had a lot of pain points through the year, 17 years of operating Rails, you can imagine. And the next one is something that I don't like to put, but it's the truth. One of the problems that we had was too much metaprogramming. I adore this book. This book is one of the reasons why I like it, Ruby. But it's true that I found that maintaining Rails code when there is a lot of metaprogramming becomes super hard. But actually, I think that in the 2010s, everybody loved metaprogramming until we started hitting walls. We hit this wall when we tried to upgrade to 5. Basically, trying to upgrade to 5 broke the whole test. Like everything exploded. So at this point, we decided to go hard mode because for a long time we were, fixing things with monkey patches, just trying to do the bare minimum so we could continue building features. At this point, we decided, well, if we want to have a well-maintained application, we need to go hard mode. So the upgrade from Rails 4 to 5 took 2.5 years. We cleaned the code extremely. We removed almost all magic possible. It was a lot of work. This is actually the evolution of amount of tests failed and error during the last year or so. And what was the hardest part? Well, one was stronger params. One thing that was like a pattern at Zendesk was that we implemented things slightly before Rails implemented them themselves. So we had stronger parameters that was completely different from Rails. In the moment that Rails adopted the stronger params, I don't know if it was in 4 or in 5, we had to change all our endpoints to work in the Rails way. Another case, and maybe some of you remember this because it was talked a lot in that time, was how dirty attributes worked. So before in Rails 5.1, you did user.name, Cristian, user.save, user.change, that would return true. In 5.2, they did, if the change has been committed, user.change should return false. This seems like pretty innocent change, but we were using it a lot in callbacks, things like this. And this meant that a lot of endpoints became broken, or some were passing, but we were not sure if they made sense. And again, the changes to fix this were not very hard, but this meant communicating with tens of teams across the whole world. It took a long time. It took 6 months for us to, these had 6 months to operate. The good news is that since we did all the hard work of cleaning magic out of the application, it has been way easier. Still, my conclusion here is that a lot of times we had first mover disadvantage. Like we tried to build something by ourselves, like the first ones, and eventually we had to go back to the work of the community. Current example is sharding. We've been using sharding for more than 10 years for sure. most probably 12, 13 years, and we have still our own logic for sharding. One of the things that we're working on right now is to change it and to use the one that comes with Rails main since Rails 6, I think. My advice out of all this would be to join the community. So if you think that, oh, there is a feature that is missing in Rails, create an issue, talk with people, and don't do your work in private. Try to share it as much as possible. Okay, we're getting to the end. I would like to leave you with a few words. So yeah, as I was talking before, I did a presentation only about the scaling Rails performance. But then when I started talking with other people, I realized that scaling performance was not that dangerous for companies. In the end, the advantage of performance is that it's very obvious. Like if you have a very slow Rails app, it's obvious, and sometimes it even breaks. A bad engineering organization is way harder to detect. Even what is a well-run organization? That's even debatable. What is a well-run environment for engineering? That's up for debate, I think, a lot of times. My opinion is that knowing history can help. Have you ever felt how you feel when you talk with an engineer that has been a couple of years in the company and they ask you something and wow, you know exactly because you've been a long time doing this. You feel a bit like you feel a bit like you have superpowers, no? Like you're a wizard. Okay. But at the same time, the past can be dangerous. Like you can be, well, your idea is wrong just because we always did the other way. There's actually an anti-pattern called the frozen caveman. Actually, I discovered this when I was checking for this presentation. So what's the idea to take about time? Well, my idea is listen the history of applications of the language, but take distance from it. Imagine it's like a bard explaining you a story that you don't have any emotional attachment to it, but you can learn things from it. Yeah, and I'm done. But by the way, I'm happy to talk here because we're also hiring in Krakow. So. Okay.
Any question? There is.
Hi, thanks for your speech. I have a question. So, what's the current version you're running on, and how much did the last update took you?
I honestly not sure. I think it's Rails 7.1 or yeah. What?
7.1 is the most recent.
Yeah. It's always 7.2. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, we're always catching up. But now since we did this crazy effort to move to 5, we are always. Other times we are like one minor version behind, but we are not super behind anymore.
So Shopify is running its core large monolith against on Rails main branch. Why not just do it? Why run it against two branches instead of just running on current main?
Sorry, I didn't get like the.
You're running. You said before that you're running on a specific Rails version, and that you're also running your tests against the one that you want to upgrade to in the future.
Yes.
Right. Why not just run the application like Shopify on the current main of Rails, like the current upstream?
Well, okay. The thing is that a lot of times we wanted to do it like gradually. Like we didn't want to jam a lot of versions. I think now it would make more sense because we are not that far from main. But for a lot of times we were like, when we were running 4 until Rails 6 was already there. So now we will start to do like just the next version that we want to jump to. If we would try again the main Rails of main branch of Rails, it would be too far.
Hi, Christian. That was amazing talk. One quick question. I noticed that we all noticed that you have a lot of custom code and libraries, so on and so forth. And I wonder how at Zendesk you tackle the onboarding of new engineers. How long the onboarding goes, and if you would be able to point like 2 or 3 magic tricks that you've done to make it as it is.
Yeah, actually, that's a good question, and it's something I would like to learn more myself. It depends a lot of where you're joining Zendesk. Like, I mean, I remember a comment, like someone in Twitter wrote a couple of years ago, like Zendesk is abandoning Ruby. Here in my office, nobody uses it, and for me, it was like, wow, that's a big news to me. So you literally can be at Zendesk and think that nobody's using Ruby. Like that was someone from the office in Krakow, by the way. So it depends a lot on which team you are onboarding. If you work in, I don't know, in Zopim, for example, I would say that the code base that you need is way smaller because Zopim is smaller as a service. If you work in the monolith, it's a harder onboarding. So.
So you rather join? Oh, thank you. So you rather join a single team, you grow within that team, and you stay in that team.
Well, no, we allow a lot of people changing teams. I've been in 4 or 5 teams during my career at Zendesk.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. So regarding to event-driven architecture, do you use something like event sourcing, CQRS, event storming, event modeling, Zendesk?
Yeah, we use quite a lot of. This is something that we are moving more and more on that direction. We use a lot of event sourcing for communicating between services.
Thank you for the talk. And how long does your 55,000 test suite run on CI?
It depends because we go faster with the time. I think it takes around 15 minutes average. Yeah, sometimes 20, between 15 and 20. Yeah, the thing is that we run in parallel, of course. So it's like the wars. That's why I say in groups of 2,000 because they are, so at the end it's just the time that 2,000 take.
Okay, and do you have system tests or integration tests? Like
we do. So we have some smaller feature tests that run with the unit ones, but then when you do a deploy, we have a staging environment first, and we run all the API tests and all the browser tests against staging. Then I think we have a pod that's Canary. That's like the first pod that we deploy on production. We run some less tests against Canary in both API and browser, and then it's the whole.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for this presentation. And my question will be about gems. It looks like you have at least 15 gems. I noticed it. How do you handle this gem version? And it looks like Ryan, maybe the man who manages all of that. When there is like a conflict between versions, how it solves?
Yeah, I don't know honestly. Like, what do you mean, like a conflict between?
Okay, so for example, I updated gem and specified the next version, right? And I need to update gem file log because I noticed that gem file.next.
Yeah.
So maybe my question will be related to this one. And for example, you updated gem library and also put, let's say, version number 100.
Yeah.
My pull request should be merged, and your pull request should be merged.
I see. So okay. So actually, in this case, like the first one that merges the PR would get it. Like the thing is that eventually, yeah, of course. So you mean like what happens if like you have two gems that require two completely different versions? We haven't had a case like this for a while, honestly. I don't know what we'll do. Most probably would.
Because we had totally the same situation, and we do not use gem version at all. We just use this SHA version in gem file log because it's just a pain when you have. In your case, you have about 2K developers. In our case, we have just 100, but it's also a pain when we continuously update those gems.
I don't know what we'll do. It would depend a lot on the situation. Sometimes we literally ping the person that maintains the gem. Can you change that? Sometimes we do run private forks of gems just to fix some issues. We did that before. For example, one thing you can do is you can monkey patch the gem in the application. We did that a lot before. We moved to REST 5 because it's kind of bad. So yeah, it would depend a lot on the situation. But we do use gem file and
okay.
Gem file.
Thank you.
Thank you for great presentation. Just for more out of curious, how often do you deploy for the production?
We deploy now. I think lately we deploy less, but maybe 2 or 3 times a day. Yeah, we do.
Nice. On the 2-3 times on day, and all canaries.
On what? On
All canary deployed.
Yeah, all full deploys. You mean to the whole?
Nice. Thank you.
Yeah, no. It takes. I mean, a deploy takes between 2 hours and a half and 3 hours.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Sorry, the last question, and you can still ask question later.
Oh, actually, one thing. Like the deploy takes so long, not because we are deploying the code, that's very easy, but because we take there's a huge stops in between different stages. Like we run API tests, we also ask everybody, please, can you check that your change took effect? I mean, we had sometimes you have very weird error. Once upon a time, I was asked to bump a gem that had been without bumping for a year, and it took me almost 6 months of work. When I was deploying it, when I was thinking, I did 3 pods, it's fine. Now it's the highway. I hit the European pod, and there was a problem with the serialization of Russian or something like this, and everything fell apart. I had to roll back the deploy. So it's good to give you time. Like, I mean, we could technically we could deploy way faster. We just don't want to mess with our customers.
I have a question. So yeah, I'm here.
Sorry.
Nice to meet you, by the way. So my question is, do you actually use TDD? And if so, what part of your test suite is unit tests and what part is the other?
Yeah. I mean, so it's impossible to code to add code to Classic, as we call the monolith, if a test doesn't pass through it. Like we have, I think it's a Robocop. I don't remember now how we do that, but we established that. I love TDD. I think we should use it even more. I think actually, for me at least, it helps me to understand the feature better. Sometimes you cannot go for it, but I always say please try for everyone because I think it's great. Then about testing. I think our unit test suite is fantastic. I think maybe we could add even more API tests and browser tests. But yeah, every time that we develop a new feature, it comes with API tests and browser tests. So.
Okay, thank you, Christian.